Hey there everybody, and welcome to the next video on files. In this video we'll cover how you output to a file. So how do you write information to a file, in contrast to the previous video where we read information in from a file. So last time we did input, this time we do output. And just like with the previous video, I'll show you two different flavors of data writing. I'll show you how to do it with numbers and how to do it with text. So how do you do it with strings? Two big examples, numbers and strings. So first of all, what's the syntax for writing to a file? It's actually very similar to reading from a file with some important caveats that I'll cover in the video. So if you want to open a file called numbers.csv to write to it, instead of reading from it, this W will do that. Recall in the last video there was a little R there for read. Now there's a W for write. That this line of code here opens numbers.csv in write mode, in writing mode. And by the way, if this file doesn't exist, Python will create it for you and then put it in the same folder as your Python file. So you can use this line of code to just create a file from nowhere, write your information to it, and now that information is saved. Now I'm going to show you what this means in a second. This is a bit vague right now, but suppose that this file already exists. You open it in write mode, and then you write some data to it. You will overwrite all the data that was already there. So you'll basically wipe the file clean and then put your new information in there. Well, suppose you don't want to do that. Suppose you want to keep the information that was already there and just add extra information to the file. You would open it in append mode to do that. So there are three ways you can open a file. R, you can have an R right here. That just reads information in, no writing to. W, which lets you write information to a file, but will get rid of any previous data that was already there, or append, in which case when you write to the file, you won't get rid of the information that was there, you will just append to the end of the file. Okay, so in this video we'll cover the W and the A modes. We've already covered the R mode. And lastly, when writing to a file, you must include a command for closing it. So after you write your information to the file, you have to explicitly close it in the code. Otherwise, the file itself, it won't be created if you're trying to create a file. It'll just freak out at you if you don't close it. So you do have to close your files when you're writing. In contrast to the previous video, we actually didn't have to close the files after we opened them when we read information in, but now we do have to do that. So how do you write information to a .csv file? Well, there's just a .write command. So you have your file open, .write, and whatever is in parentheses gets written to the file. So I want to show you a very baby example of this. I want to create this file here. This file is not saved on my computer, so it's not actually on my computer right now. I want to create a file where the first line is a 2 and the second line is a 3. A very small file, right? So this is just a baby example to show you the syntax. So to do that, I have to go to my compiler. So first, this file doesn't exist, so I'm going to open it in write mode, and then I'm going to call this just a Z, so I know where it's going to be saved. And I'm going to write to it, like that. Okay, so z.csv does not exist right now. So because I've opened it in write mode, Python will create it. And then what I want to do is just write a couple of things to it. So I want to tell Python, like, hey, put a 2 in there. There's a 2 right there, you know. So hey, Python, put a 2 there. And then, hey, Python, when you're done doing that, go ahead and put a 3 in there. You know, there's a 3 right there. And then, hey, Python, when you're done, close that file. I need this dot close right here, right? Okay, so notice, if you read this in English, it should be fairly clear what's happening. I'm opening a file called z.csv. I'm going to write information to it. What am I going to write to it? I'm going to give it a 2. I'm going to write a 3 to it. And then I'm going to close it when I'm done. Okay, so if you believe this here, right, this file doesn't exist, Python will create it, put it in the same folder, so on my desktop, that's where everything is for me, and write 2 and 3 to it. Okay, so I run this, and it's mad at me. Okay, so it's like, whoa, 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 what do you want me to do here? You know, and your first reaction should be like, why can't it do this? I mean, it's pretty clear what you want, right? Write a 2, write a 3, and then close. Okay, there's something very obnoxious about writing information to CSV files in Python, and it's telling you here, you must write strings. not numbers. Python will not let you write numbers as numbers to a CSV file, at least not through Spyder like this. That is obnoxious, but what are you going to do? So I actually have to do it like this, like, oh, not the number 2, the string 2. So that's the first takeaway from this. Whenever you write to a CSV file, you must be writing strings. So now I'm going to run this, and it did not freak out at me, okay? So let me minimize everything. Here's z.csv, which did not exist a second ago. I'm going to open it and see what it looks like. It looks like, in case you can't see it, it looks like it wrote the number 23. I didn't want it to do 23. I wanted it to do 2 followed by a 3. So what's the deal with all that, you know? And the reason that it wrote a 23 is actually, I mean, it didn't actually write a 23. It wrote the symbol 2 followed by the symbol 3. It put them in the same line because you didn't tell it to start a new line. So if you want that 3 to be on the next line, where's my compiler? You actually have to like manually tell Python, like, hey, after you write that 2, I'm going to need you to start a new line, man. Like that. So, hey, Python, put a 2 in there, and it's got to be a string 2, not the number 2. And then, hey, hit enter, Python, new line character. Then write a 3. Okay, so let me close that. Let me just delete it. So it's gone. Now when I run this, see, once again, it creates that file from thin air. And then, what do you know? There's my 2 and my 3. So this is how you have to write information to a CSV file using Python. You have to be writing strings, and you have to actually tell it to start a new line when you want it to move down to the next cell. Okay, so let me go back here. Okay, so here are 2 notes, right? When you write to a CSV file, whatever you're writing has to be a string, and then you do have to start a new cell. Now, before I show you the 2 big examples, I do want to illustrate the difference between write mode and append mode. And I'm going to show you that with numbers.csv. This is the file from last video. Numbers.csv looks like this. It just has like 19 numbers in it. These are exam scores or something, right? Okay, so watch what happens if I open that. Numbers.csv. I'm going to open it in append mode. And I'm just going to write a, all I'm going to do is write a 2 to it. Okay, so file, I'll write a 2. So I'm going to run this. Open numbers.csv, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, it's the same file, but notice it says 83.2 down here. You see? So it just appended a 2, and it appended it in an obnoxious way. It appended it to that 83. So if you want to have it not do that, let me just like make this back into an 83. You got to tell like, hey man, when you're appending, start by hitting enter, you know, hit enter, then append. So let me save this back. That's back the way it was. Yes, close. Yes, please save. Sorry, my computer just doesn't like these CSVs sometimes. Okay, so now it's going to open that in append mode, hit the enter key, write a 2. So now numbers.csv is here. And there's my 2 at the end, right? It appended it to the end of the file. Now, by contrast, I'm going to open it in write mode. Let me get rid of this. So open number.csv in write mode and then write a 2 to that file. Let's see what it does now. Did it run it? Run. Okay. When I open number.csv now, it just has a 2 in it. You know, where did all my data go? I used to have 19 other exam scores in there. Now there's just a 2. That's the difference between write mode and append mode. If you open something in write mode and then you write things to it, it's going to clear the file out and then start writing the new stuff. It overwrites things. So a lot of times append is what you want if you want to keep information and just add information to it. So you have to know what you want and you have to know what you're doing when you open a file to write information from it, right? So that's the difference between write and appending. So there is a pretty big difference, right? If you have a file that has like thousands of lines of stuff you need, you better not wipe it out when you want to add information to it, right? You should append things so you don't wipe things out. Okay, so now let me show you a couple of examples that unify both input and output. So there's a file on Moodle called homeprices.csv. It contains the sale price of like 2,600 homes in a large city during the last few years. So it's home price data for some year range. So suppose you only care about like expensive houses, where by expensive, let's just mean over $300,000. Suppose you care about that enough, you want to create a file consisting of just those prices and forget about what you're considering less expensive homes. So let's write a program that creates a file containing just these expensive numbers. Let's see how that works. Okay, so again, homeprices.csv, it's on Moodle. For me, I've already downloaded it and put it on my desktop. It has 2,600 home prices in it. Okay, so if you want Python to process that file, right, you first have to open that. And you have to tell Python to read that data in, right? Homeprices.csv is out there, right, sitting right here. So there's the first house sold for 332,603 and so on, right? So if you're going to pluck out the expensive houses, you first have to process the entire list here. There's no way around that. So first you're going to have to open that file in read mode just so you can see what's in there. And then I'm just going to type code here from the last video. File.readLines. And what we do in the last video, we created a copy of that list that was cleaned up, right? So this is, again, all from last time. So we had to go through lines. We had to what? Strip the new line characters off. This is numeric data. So we have to strip new lines off and turn things into integers like that. So now line ones is a copy of that column from the Excel spreadsheet, but it's all cleaned up for us, right? So now we have line ones, right? Have line one like that. We have all the information. So now the question is, okay, well, how do I pluck out the things that I care about? How do I go in there and pluck out the expensive homes? And the answer is you do it just like you do this task before. There's nothing new here, really. It's just as you're doing this plucking out of the things you care about, you'll write the information to a file instead of, say, counting. So for, like before, I could have asked you, like, hey, count the number of expensive homes. And if you want to count the number of expensive homes, so for price in lines 1 like that, you would do something like this. If the price is over $300,000, count it. Plus equals 1 like that, right? And you can like print the count. So let me just pause here and see if it's doing this. Oh, 0. Okay, yeah. There are no expensive homes? That can't be right. Okay, so let's do a little troubleshooting here. So when things don't work, sometimes it's helpful to just see how you might check things. Oh, print lines 1. Oh, okay. Yeah. Lines 1 is empty. Why is that? Because I didn't do what I said to do from the last video. I didn't throw these items into the list. All right, that was kind of silly, right? I'm supposed to create a copy. Anyway, so these kinds of errors crop up all the time, right? So you can catch them by asking the computer to print information for you, right? You tell the computer, hey, what are you thinking this is right now? And the computer's like, I think it's nothing, man. Did you want it to be something? And then you say, yeah, I sure did want it to be something, you know? Anyway, so let's try this again. Okay, now it's got a bunch of stuff here, right? This is lines 1 right here. All the home prices. And what the computer's claiming is it counted 445 of them. Okay, so that makes sense. So there were 2,600 numbers in there originally, and of those 2,600, 445 are what we're calling expensive, $300,000 or over. Anyway, all that to say, this is the kind of task we could have done, 2 weeks ago or something. Now, instead of counting, what do we want to do? If the price is over 300,000 or equal to 300,000, we want to record that information inside a file now. So let me create a file, get rid of this printing, file 2 maybe, right? Let's create a file called expensive homes. I mean, call it whatever you want, right? CSV. And now I'm going to write to it instead of read in. This file doesn't exist yet, so you don't have anything to read. So now you're going to create it and write the information to it. Okay, and so here, instead of counting the price, I'm just going to write the price to it. So file2.write price. That's what I want to do. However, and so then you kind of just want to be done, right? File2.close. You want to just kind of do this. However, as we have seen previously, you can't just do this simple little thing you might want to do, right? Like, hey, Python, when you see a price like this, toss that price into the file, right? Write that to the file. You can't do that. You have to first do this obnoxious thing. You have to make that price into a string. As we already saw previously, right? Python cannot write numbers to a CSV file obnoxiously. So you make that price into a string, then you write that price, and then you got to tell Python like, hey, once you're done with that first price, hit the enter key to move on to the next line. So that's how you can like take information from some other file and then pluck out what you want from it, you know, whatever, create a new file with some sort of subset of the old data. So let's run this and see what it does. So expensivehomes.csv, again, doesn't exist on my computer. It would be right here, I guess, right? It doesn't exist yet. So when I hit enter or play, see it runs, and now it's created this file. So let's open this and see what it is. It's a bunch of numbers that are 300,000 or bigger, you know. Wow, mostly in the 300,000s. Is it all in the 300,000s? Let's see. Pretty close, right? Oh, so there's $1 million thing, right? Anyway, so that's how you can take information from a file and write it to a new file. Okay, so that was numeric information. I think I have one more example. So again, this example, it exists to show you writing, but also to unify the two videos, right? So you read in information using this. That information has been read in right here, right? Or right here, I guess, the for loop is done. Then you can use that read in information to pluck out what you want. So let's do the same kind of thing, but now let's just do it for strings, just so we have both numbers and strings. Okay, so that text twist file from the last video. Suppose you're making a new version of text twist that's easier. So instead of having 6-letter words, now the user or the player just enters 5 letters or fewer. So the original text twist had 6 letters. Suppose you want to make it easier for kids or something, right? And now it only has 5 letters. Let's take the text twist file and pluck out the words with 5 or fewer letters. Let's see how we do that. Okay, so here I'm just going to modify what I have. Text twist words. That file is still on Moodle. It's also still on my desktop somewhere. Text twist. Oh, it's not. All right, well, I must have trashed it accidentally. Let's see. I did trash it accidentally. Let me put it back. All right. There it is. Okay, so open that, still on my desktop. And again, I can read in the lines just like before. But just like before, I do not want to turn these words into integers. That would be bad because they're not numbers. So this, again, is all just from the last video. And now I want to create a file called, I mean, whatever, right? Words, 5 letters or less. You can give it a better name if you want, right? But now I'm going to create a file with the 5-letter words or the 4 3-letter words. And so now I just need to go through lines 1. So for each word in lines 1, what do I want to have happen? Now, in order to record it, I care if it has 5 letters or fewer. So if the length of the word I'm looking at right now has 5 letters or fewer, then I'm going to write it to the file. And now I no longer need to make it a string because it's already a string. So it doesn't hurt to have this here. Like you could do this if you wanted to, but you don't need it because words are already strings. They weren't converted to integers up here. So I'll keep it for now just so you can see. So now I write that word to the file. So if the word has this property I want, I'll record it in that file. Okay, so again, notice words-5 is nowhere on my desktop. But when I run this, there it is, you know. So let's open it and look. It contains words with 5 letters or fewer. So there used to be 6-letter words in here, right? But notice only 5 letters or fewer. Okay, so that's really nice, you know. So again, you can read data in and then throw data out. You can do this as many times as you want for whatever properties you want. You know, it's really nice. Let me just show you one last thing here. What if you forget to do this closing thing? So let me take this and trash it. So it's the same code. It's supposed to create this file for me, but I forgot to close it. Let's see what it does. Oh, it worked. Well, I was trying to make a point, and then it worked on me. You know, I really should try these ahead of time, making these videos. But I'm so tired and so behind, I'm not going to cut this out. Anyway, sometimes, like when I say sometimes, I mean students last semester or last time had issues with this. If you don't close it, it will freak out at you. Sometimes it won't create the file. Sometimes it won't write all the information you want to the file. And in particular, if later, right, here's the real issue. If you forget to close it and then later you want to access it, so like down here, you're like, hey, computer, open file 2 so I can read what's in there. Then a lot of times it'll freak out at you right there. Now, again, it kind of screwed me over by not freaking out immediately. So now I feel bad. And I feel not bad enough to cut this out of the video because again, I'm super behind, but whatever. Anyway, so if you forget to close it, then when you want to read it later, it's going to have a lot of trouble doing that. So you should always close it to make sure there's no issues later in the program. Okay, so at the end of this video, we can now write information to files also if we want to, right? And we can do the sort of fancy thing of read information in from one file and then feed it to a separate file. That's really nice. That'll come in handy, in particular for your homework, but this is a handy thing to have just in general, right? Anytime you want to process data where the data is fairly, streamlined. Like again, this kind of file with only a single column. In practice, you'll have data files with many more columns. So we're going to pause the course to do things like take an exam and do a project over this intro to computer science stuff, you know, the loops and lists and all that stuff, right? But then after that, we'll move into crunching much bigger spreadsheets. So spreadsheets with way more columns and way more information inside them. And at that point, we'll just need bigger tools to handle that. So we'll need we'll have to plug into Python's libraries that are super nice for tasks like that. So that's where we're headed after this. That's where the course will sort of wrap up.